turn now. I'm going to keep it short. I've known Uwe for a long time, so I could probably sit up here for 30 minutes and tell you about why and what and how important it is that he's here, and I'm grateful for it. But I'm going to say a few short things. First of all, welcome to the Craft and Construction Lecture Series. This is the first of its kind. We just started it, and we should be grateful, the School of Construction, to the Mississippi State Board of Contractors and the Mississippi Construction Education Fund, because they have endorsed this and supported this with financial funds, and they love the idea. Also, I need to be very grateful to the Dean's Office. Dr. Masterson actually gave me the idea about, why don't you do a lecture series like we do in biology? And Dr. Hare said, you should do it. So this is very positive, and I'm grateful for it. And then I also want to thank the student constructors. They show up to these events even when we don't have a major speaker. They are serious. This is a new group. It's changed since I've been here. I've been here just a little over a year. And I want to thank their student sponsor, faculty sponsor, Jessica Hardy, because she's been involved in getting the word out, the press, the posters, and pulling this student constructors group together. It's a complete turnaround from the year before. So now, the speaker today, Urs-Peter Flueckiger. Did I get it right?
Perfect.
He goes by Ube. He's an architect. He's a teacher and he's a friend. I met him in 2002 at an occasion very similar to this one, when we were doing involved in the National Beginning Design Conference, and I met him that way. I tell you this because sometimes the people you befriend are not ones you plan on, and you just meet somebody, they have a common interest, and the interest is maintained. And we did it at the conference. He came from Lubbock, and I was in Oklahoma, Stillwater. There's a great story behind it, but you're going to have to go with them afterwards to hear it, and it's worth it. But he's from Switzerland originally, and now in Lubbock, Texas, as a full professor at the College of Architecture at Texas Tech University. I'm going to read one thing specifically, because I got over 20 honors, but I want to read one of them that really stood out. But he studied architecture in Switzerland at the Schule für Gestaltung in Basel. He also got his post-professional degree in the United States at the Virginia Polytechnic Institute of State University, also known as Virginia Tech. But he's also done practice that's pretty outstanding, and that is he worked with Mario Botta in Switzerland. So if you studied architecture in your modern history course, you've certainly heard of him. And also interned and practiced in New York City with the Rockwell Group. There's more than that, but those are the two highlights. So he's going to talk to you about the sustainable cabin, which weaves architecture, construction, education, and being a responsible citizen, which I think is the thread that carries the biggest noise with me, or the biggest weight. He's going to talk about the built environment, how all of these things are related, and if I will, it says it's just what you leave behind that's very important, and what you have care for and what you have passion for. So I will let Professor Flueckiger.
Thank you very much, Eric. This is way too long.
Oh, Thank you. I'm not done. This is the thing I wanted to say.
Oh,
You got to hear this one. He was awarded the American Institute of Architect Merit Award in recognition of outstanding architectural design and achievement for the design build project of the sustainable cabin. That's one of 20 awards. So thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me here. I've been here now 2 days, my second day, and I'm very grateful to be here. I have seen things. You're very, very gracious with your time, and many of you actually have seen in your classroom, so I really appreciate that. I'm going to right jump into it. I'm going to talk about 3 projects. I'm going to have to emphasize a little bit about the sustainable cabin, as we call it here at Texas Tech, but also as the inspiration which basically led to this book. And I talk a little bit about ecology or sustainability. The book actually is out in 3 different languages and 3 different separate editions. That wasn't really my idea, but the publisher really thought that's important because we have books, we have places actually in France, and in this country, and then because it's a German-Swiss publisher, so they did it in German also. So here what I show you is basically 3 panoramas, and I had this idea of creating a book which would have fold-out pages and all that. And you know, like it is, you know, like you have to live with your constraints. So all we got in the book is actually 3 black and white photographies. But what I can show you now is actually the actual photography when it was in color. But first of all, you know, like, can you actually see the cabin here? There's a cabin in there. You already have way too good eyes, you know. So for those of you who haven't seen it, this is where the donut is, you know. So what I try to sort of get you in your mindset is that actually nature for about 150 years ago, it was sort of really more prominent than it is today. And that's why I chose that photography, because it can be really the dominating thing. And today we have sometimes forgotten that. And that's kind of the concept I want to give you with the landscape of Thoreau. And actually here in the back, that's where your lake is. It's frozen at the time. Believe it or not, in spring break of 2013, that's when I took that picture. It was the last plane landing in there. Same thing now at the Côte d'Azur in France. So you have Le Corbusier's cabin they're all precedents, and the big Carotte tree. This one is a 360 view, so if you're seeing his little work shack twice, that's not a coincidence, that is like that. Last but not least, our cabin, we call it a sustainable cabin, here in a 180-degree view. Where I'm from, Lubbock, that's one of the flattest areas on Earth. So sort of going up and down in Hattiesburg, I say, well, that's kind of neat. I'll see a little topography here. So how much house? Why would anybody have that title? So the way it is, it's actually my dad who asked me to read a story when I was about a middle schooler. I'm not sure which grade exactly, but here I sort of give you the synopsis of that story. So it's by Leo Tolstoy, which actually incidentally lived sort of at a similar time as Henry David Thoreau, but on the other end, so in Russia. In Leo Tolstoy's 1886 short story, How Much Land Does a Man Need?, the protagonist Pahom believes that with each round of newly acquired land and wealth, he will be happier. Instead, with each round of additional acquired land and wealth, he wants more. The Bashkir people presented Pahom with the ultimate challenge. For just 1,000 rubles, they will give him as much land as he can walk around during the course of one day, from sunrise to sunset. The only rule Pahom must follow is to be back at the starting point before the sun sets. Pahom is thrilled about this opportunity to seize an enormous amount of land for little money. However, he miscalculates his timing, and at the end of the day, he runs towards the fast-sinking sun. He makes it back just in time, but collapses dead from exhaustion. His domestic buries him in an ordinary grave, thus answering the question, how much land does a man need? The size of an ordinary thumb. All right. Now this maybe sounds a little bit dark, but you have to imagine you're being in middle school. Then it was really dark, and my imagination was like, why? He had already so much. Why is he not just a little bit cutting it short? I just couldn't comprehend as an 11-year-old, 12-year-old. So in a way, that's sort of a sustainable notion. We're thinking instead of having large or as much as we possibly can, their houses, they are 4,000, 6,000 square feet. And when it's at that size, we studied actually patterns of moving patterns on the starter castles. Certain people don't go in certain rooms. So a size is a big part of sustainability. I'll talk to you about that. So this actually happens to be a collaborative project. You will see it at the very end. So I had a graduate student, first undergraduate student, doing the drawings for me in this book, so in collaboration. I'll try really to make my research part of my teaching and what I am. So when we look actually at the inspiration, there is no photography of Thoreau's house because nobody at the time thought it was important. In fact, nobody thought Walden would be an important book when he published it. So it kind of a hard time selling. So the closest we know here is this careen here. So that's when people started literally where the cabin was. It was moved back onto a farmer's thing and was used as a storage for grain. So what happened is people were actually Thoreau was a special person, so those friends who came out there, they put the date behind the rock and started dropping that rock there. But it wasn't the exact location, so this is the earlier photograph which is known. I went to every single of these sites and actually visited Thoreau Institute. That's the only surviving, and I call it a roof rafter of the house. And I looked at it for quite some time and said, well, you know, if you actually cut the lumber down or you cut the trees from the site, you know, like it wouldn't be as straight as they are now machined. So it's believable, but I don't really know. So I was really impressed to actually know or see something Thoreau has touched with his own hands. He used bricks, so this is a second-hand brick. They had a chimney there, and what I did here, I measured it so I could do the drawings. If you see the little pencil marks there for the book, we already in mind, well, maybe goes into a book. There were no machine-made nails back then, so they were hand-forged. They found that, so that's at the Thoreau Institute. And this is what's called now Thoreau's Cove. So what happened is in 1945 on July 4th, a gentleman named Roland Wells Robbins, he went to the site and actually said, well, hey, where did this cabin actually stood? It was the 100th anniversary. Thoreau started his journey actually living there right on July 4th. So nobody really knew. So he started digging and found the foundation from the chimney, and it had a cellar, so he found traces of it and then basically laid out the dimensions. So that's what you see when you visit Walden today. So here is the granite markers who mark the entrance and the orientation, but there's really nothing there. I also have to mention that all the trees are actually regrowth because that was a woodlot, so there's no single tree you see in the nature here are actually the trees from who Thoreau would see. So what we had the idea is they had a replica right in the parking lot. And we did this photo montage, as you just saw, and we sort of give that impression now of what that could look like, because at some point he writes actually, well, it's right at the shore. I had a house at the shore of one pond. Well, that's not really in the shore, right? It's quite a few hundred feet away. Thoreau describes actually 4 seasons. That's sort of the philosophy behind it, of life, and it goes from spring to spring, and it's kind of a nice moment to go through. So whenever you can, I always suggest to my students, if you design a place, go at it on different times of seasons, different times of the day. So what we did actually, you know, I took a GPS with me here and I laid on the corner, and I wanted to have the exact accuracy where that cabin was located. Thoreau also was an excellent draftsman, so he did surveys for making money. And there's like over 100 surveys. These are at the library, and when you actually, of the Public Library of Concord, when you start looking close, you actually can see, I'm sorry here, that this here, that's where the house was located. Not only that, when you start looking close on it, you see actually the orientation here. That's the entrance right here. And he says house. In the first edition, that's a first edition, that's not mine. Cost about $12,000 if you can starting one, but I got that somewhere from a picture, so I actually share with you. So he came with that map. And right here is the mark of the house orientation and everything. That's the page where it was next to it. But what happens is that this is an annotated edition, perhaps be the most Thoreau scholar right now, an annotated original edition, meaning it gives you the original text and then it gives you actually what it meant and it's sort of interpreted. But that map and most other printings after the first edition didn't have the orientation in there. And I found that kind of interesting. So as a scholarly research, there where the little red dot comes, that basically was omitted, even by the most authoritative scholars on Thoreau. So site orientation is really something interesting me, and then I made a jump into the 20th century, perhaps 20th century most leading architect, Le Corbusier built a cabin even smaller than Thoreau for himself. There he is. It's under construction. Actually, it was prefabricated in Corsica, which is an island south of France, and then moved by train onto the site. So here he is working in the summer. No air conditioning, ventilation, but this is the site. So it's really a splendid outlook. The colors were just marvelous. I visited multiple times, and he took a swim every day when he could, and actually that's where he also, some suggest, ended his life. He had a heart attack while being swimming in the morning at 10, and the doctor doesn't told him, you can't go swimming at the morning at 10, but he did. So lots of mysterious speculation how he really passed away. Here is those railroad tracks right here, so you would have the train sitting on the tracks. Came in the morning at 3, and then in parts it was moved down there. So before that, that showed you just how narrow and tiny this is. I suggest that it probably would have been rebuilt, that entire site. Wouldn't it be so hard to go there? So the width, the maximum width of your walking path is really about 4 to 6 feet. So it's more like 4 feet right there. So the drawings always are a medium for me to basically illustrate that. So this is there since 1952. And he said, well, you know, I really have a castle. You see the quote. And 3.66 by 3.66, that's about 12 feet by 12 feet. That's about the modest children's bedroom these days. So he lived there for a month every day after he did it. And famously, he talked about the philosophy and the Nautilus shale and the spiral. And I looked at all that, and then we made our drawings. But he said, well, 12 feet by 12 feet is really a square. So what he, in his own work, did, he never mentioned the hallway and the bathroom. Why wouldn't he do that? You know, it's like, okay, so you have to be honest. You know, it's not 12 by 12. It's actually more like 12 by 14 and a half. So I basically write about that. So I'm documenting the hallway. All here is interesting. This here is a cutout door, because Le Corbusier didn't have a kitchen, and but when he got hungry at night, you know, he could just go pass through that door and grab on the refrigerator and all that stuff. You know, like the kitchen sink and all this is sometimes difficult to integrate in your design, right? The messy stuff a little bit, the utility stuff. Well, he outsourced that. So when you start thinking about, you know, he just cut a door in there to the restaurant, and of course, in the middle of the night, you know, he went there and got a snack. At least that's what I imagine. So here the hardware and all that, it's very carefully crafted. It's with plywood, and it has this large tree there. But he worked outside without air conditioning. If you have ever visited the south of France, this is what it looks today. This is what it looked before. It can get quite hot in the south of France. So you have, it's not subtropical like here, but you have orange trees, and it does not snow. Maybe you see a trace at some time. So what I'm trying to say, that the nature is splendid. So often what we underestimate is the outdoor space on any type of buildings. That's what I try to emphasize. So you still can go there by car. This is the train station you see. And from there, that's exactly the path I walked to it. So all these inspirations basically led to our sustainable cabin. So here's where I'm going to be a little bit longer, because I think that's of interest of you. So first of all, well, how did we came up with our square footage? Well, 144, because I'm from Texas. You know, like Le Corbusier's is 144 square feet. So we make it twice as big, you know, because everything is bigger in Texas. Now, that's still fairly small. So here is the first conceptual sketch, and it says literally, and I want you to notice the 2006. So I thought today when I prepared, or the entire week for the lecture, is, you know, it really took us a long time. You know, we have not the budget of the University of Texas, so we had to have different concepts. And for me, in architecture, money for me as a designer matters. And I have done previously designing that, but here are the precedents. And what's not shown, this actually is not a picture I took, that's a carob tree. And the entire crown can be up to 46 feet. And when I visited it the year before, there was a thunderstorm and diminishing the crown by half. And of course, this created shade. And most of the scholars, it has been published very many times, but most of the scholars don't write about the shade aspect and the natural heating and cooling aspects of that. Glenn Murcutt, a personal favorite of mine, he works in Australia. His work is very high-tech, so we couldn't have that much of money spent on our cabin. But what he does cross-ventilation, and none of his houses have air conditioning, so it's naturally ventilated. And then the last president is basically Samuel Mockbee. He's an architect. He did something called the Rural Studio. And his concern is similar as mine. Is like, you don't have to spend a fortune in order to make yourself a name and good architecture. And he did it for the people. So in Hale Country, Alabama, what he actually did is he went out to the community in some of the areas where they didn't really have much economical fortune. He helped redesigning their entire community. And it's called a design build studio, so the students actually go out there and apply their crafts. Thoreau already talked about it, but what's want to show you here, so Thoreau paid $28.12.5 for his cabin. And he says, well, many people never really take in account how much their houses cost, and most of them are overpriced. Well, sounds like just today. I mean, not overpriced, but over budget, right? So he wrote everything down, and you can see the second-hand window use with glass, 1,000 of old bricks, 1,000 of old bricks. So what he actually did is, that's where you get a lead point today when you look for certification. If you recycle something from an existing home. So that basically was really a concept for us. This is the landscape where I live in. So I was dreaming about to get that spot here. I didn't know the owner. There's about 45 minutes, and I'd ride my motorcycle out here. So do that on the weekends, and I looked at that, hey, you know, sort of went out in the land. It would be great to have a look out there on the land, and I did a sort of, with the studio, first conceptual sketches. So the landscape you can see already, they're not high renderings, they're just ideas because we're trying to get funding. So you see the landscape and then how you would sit in there and look that out. So it had sort of a butterfly roof. And this is the ideas we dreamed the cabin should fulfill. We felt like it should do all these things in a perfect world. We modified it a little bit. Budget, maybe the second butterfly doesn't need to be there. So basically did different drawings to get money. So we submitted that to get grant monies. We also submitted it to solar panel manufacturers and other materials. So the idea here is you get solar panel from the roof, gets into the battery, and that's your power system. Collect the rainwater and have cross ventilation. So what you do is something called the Venturi effect. If you have the same amount of opening on the lower end and at a higher end, it diagonally can actually self-ventilate itself. But on actually the Great Plains, I have to tell you, there's always some wind. Actually quite a bit of wind. We had no running water, so we get about 3 times less water than you do, rainfall. We get about 18 inches, you get over 60. So we did a compost toilet, basically getting all that back into the recycle part. So that was the concept. So out getting money, then we build a model, students build a model, and here you can see sort of the half living people there. That's the ghost of Le Corbusier and Henry David Thoreau. So basically took on the site. It's 150 miles northeast of Lubbock, and this actually the original site I first had in mind, they weren't interested in my proposal. I don't know, this looks a little bit funky and all that. So anyway, these people were interested and said, okay, well, we produce it. But what the model does, because architecture is expensive, construction is expensive, this is the best way to sort of test for these people of what it might be look like. So this actually is natural light condition, just literally putting a camera in there and then photoshopping the things in there. And this is perhaps the most important part for you today. So it's literally done by students who have no previous building experience. They basically say, oh, I'm tired of this computer thing. I need sort of a class where I can use my hands, right? And that's still the case today. We still, I think, want to use our hands because in a way our jobs have become way more abstract. So our grant paid for renting out the warehouse in the warehouse district. You see the material there, you know, it's not the most modern one, newest one, so that's corrugated iron in here. And what we did is we took the 1/2 of a double wide. Do you all know what a double wide is? All right, don't have to explain it, very good. I would have to explain it by Europeans. What we did is we added gussets and expanded it from 12 feet to 14 feet. Because 14 feet you can go down the highway in Texas, you don't need a special permission. We added weight and we added another axle. So instead of 3, we had 4 axles. These are 2 by 12, so joist hangers, and then the existing I-beam going across. So you see the construction method here. So this is a 3-hour credit class, and I know some of you maybe have a 3-hour credit class, met twice a week, Tuesday, Thursdays, and in the winter time when it was below 30, I canceled the class. So, but it had to be below 30. Anyway, because it started at 8 o'clock in the morning, because the warehouse, it was not climate controlled, but it was at least rain protected, that we could just leave the tools. So it took us literally 2 years and more than 60 students who actually physically helped building the cabin. A professional contractor probably would do this in 3 to 4 weeks. But that's kind of the part of it, you know, like you try and fail and then you try again. This is one of the recycled part. What we use here is this is a recycled denim jeans. Lubbock is actually also a center for cotton. But the recycled jeans, anybody of you wearing blue jeans right now? I don't, but that's what that insulation is. So it's a recycled material. And here is, you know, I was asked earlier, well, what should I do to be really, really, really sustainable? I said, well, you know, if you insulate your house thicker than the average, you actually do more than if you put what I call solar bling out, let's say a wind turbine or a solar voltaic panel. So using renewable materials such as wood actually helps with that. And the students actually really liked it. So here is my non-sustainable moment. That's the floor. So we're insulating the floor. And then here is my non-sustainable moment. You know, like this is, I try to find a material on the floor which is not plywood or wooden board for a floorboard. But the glue strength of that, you know, because the glue is where the poison is in there, you know, there are formaldehydes and sort of things. But the strength is unbeatable, so I couldn't come up with it. And I said, well, we do the best we can, but we're using also the advantages of the 20th century. So if I have other things, you cannot produce a building who doesn't have certain materials which I would say or describe as problematic. Here is the hook for actually pulling the cabin out at some point. You see now the construction that it is a double wall, which means actually we have, our walls are 2 feet thick, and that comes out from the idea that energy conservation is your most benefitful thing. If you have a mid-century home and nobody insulated it yet, or it maybe has still single sheeting of glass, that's something you can do yourself, the insulation, or put up on the insulation in the attic. This wall, it looks fairly simple, right? Straightforward. This was crooked so bad we had to do it 3 times. And took it down again. But again, you know, you fail and then you fail again and you fail better. So at the 3rd time, there's a learning process, and especially for architects, what it means, it actually builds them respect of what the people do when they're out there building their work. And it gives them better understanding of how to do things. So it starts to take space, shape. So we also toyed with the idea to use a shipping container, but the shipping container will cost $2,000. The chassis we got for $500. Of course, wouldn't match. There's a student looking out. You can see how they're dressed. It can get cold in Lubbock. In between, what we have here, actually, this is kind of a coincidence. So we have a 2x4 and 2x4, and in between you have a gap, and that's for your electricity. There's all conducts in there, so you could actually move around. So that's the good part. So every semester we took a picture, basically new crew. The cabin grew a little bit more. There's something called solar board, so that cladding goes on there. So the way we did this here is it's actually reflecting back the heat, and it costs just about $2 more than a regular OSB board, oriented strand board. And then because we have the corrugated iron running vertically, the air, the Venturi effect again would get the hot air out in the summer. So in a way, that's off-the-shelf availability of sustainable material. And anytime he has this sticker here on there, you know, that's when you're doing something for the environment. But I'm sure there is some glue in there, which basically is not the best to get the strength out of it. So interior walls went up. And then the cladding, instead of plywood, we actually used yellow pine. You'll see that. So the site orientation is very important. You are fortunate to have woods here, so you have natural trees. There are no trees on the Great Plains. There's grass. So what we did, we oriented it slightly southeast, and I'm just showing you what that means. So there's more construction photographs. So see from the destruction, recycling of the double wide. Okay, so what that means is with that pine at the inside, what we're trying to do is the weather is quite harsh in West Texas. So what we're doing is the corrugated iron is a very good protection, and it actually gives you a lead point for the reflectivity, because we didn't choose a color, we chose the galvanized corrugated, but the inside is kind of like a wooden box, which makes you feel warm. We did not use plywood, because plywood again is where the glue is in there, and here we used natural yellow pine. So in 30 seconds you see what we did in 2 years. So I think people always underestimate how much it takes, how many failures we had. And back then there were no GoPros. So what we had is simply a screen capture on a computer, an old desktop, which took a picture every 3 minutes or so for 2 years, and that's then edited down to 30 seconds. So it's a hands-on with thinking, well, what can we do better in terms of sustainability without going over budget? And here it rolls down the highway in Lubbock on Erskine. The height is determined by the lowest underpass, which is about 16 feet, and then we had the cabin at 15.6. So this is the satellite image, so you see the orientation, and now you see the shade it gives yourself. So the hottest time of the day in West Texas, this is north here, there's the solar panels, which we actually did not move onto the roof, because for maintenance purposes it's safer to work on the ground. And as a famous person once said, in West Texas there's a lot of land but no place to go. So for us actually to put the solar panels on the ground is a lot safer than put them on the roof and have the students cleaning it. It's kind of like a windshield for maintaining it, so they have the proper power output. There's a lot of dust in West Texas. What you actually do is you wipe them off with a squeegee. I'm just giving a quick lecture here on pre-Columbian building because of passive heating and cooling features, and this is really important. So this would be the summer sun, and Mesa Verde would be in the shade, and in the winter sun basically would heat the dwelling up. And that's basically exactly what we have here. If you see the large glass sliding door right here, it's completely in shade. Yes, there is a little bit on there, but basically that's the ID with the orientation and site. This is the history of architecture in 3 seconds. So where you see the yellow dot, that's about marking 250 years, and that's when we will use all our fossil fuels. So what I'm trying to say, before buildings, the Romans started heating buildings. In the Renaissance they had heating, not so much cooling, but in 250 years we're just using the fossil fuels all up. So we have to have somehow energies who go past that. And it took billions of years to actually have the fossil fuel. So this is the finished complete cabin here. So yellow pine, bamboo flooring, porch. Here we have something called like the recycled plastic. This actually didn't hold up very well, so that's a recycled material. It's very expensive. The color is quite a bit of faded, but not intended. And here we have the cedar, also a natural material. Oh, I forgot to mention the compost toilet. This is scrap leftover wood, which we basically glued and laminated and put the sink in there. And a few still life. So what we did is we made references, and I forgot to say that if you have good precedents, it's not bad if you just tell your precedents, you know, so the stools stacked, so Henry David Thoreau, the artist, basically our reference for the design. This is the sliding door. Every student's name is mentioned in there who worked on the cabin. Recycling of the rainwater. Here is an interesting moment right here, is done by the sculpture of the art department. This is actually a drainage pipe cut in a diagonal. So this gave over our overemphasized gutter. can be very cold if you're in Texas. So if you actually see this here, this is snow here. And what we do is we bring our infrared camera out and we start photographing where it is hot. You know, the hottest things are the people right here. You know, so obviously your window is a weak spot. And then just bringing people out there, they build a patio on a later moment and sort of having them as an experience. So the cabin is no longer Texas Tech, it's belonging to the Peace River Foundation, who partially supported that particular project. So I always describe West Texas as 20% ground and 80% sky. It can be very dramatic. You may be familiar with tornadoes around here. We are too. So that gives you an idea, but it's just going to go about in a month or two, we'll have that particular scenario. So as Thoreau, maybe sort of the first environmentalist, you know, like I think he did that unconsciously. He simply said, well, as a sort of enclosing moment, you have to care of what your resources are, or simply you have to care with what you do. And I think then I'm sure you are ready to make a lot more sustainable world. So I wouldn't end unless mentioning literally every single person who supported or worked on that particular project, because too often, you know, I'm now the representative of this. Yes, I wrote the book alone, but you're trying to literally encompass that, because architecture isn't a star discipline. In my book, it takes everybody. So suppliers, people who work with us, we didn't do the electrical ourselves, they're all mentioned here. So again, I'm very grateful to be here, and I thank you for your attention and your time. If there is any questions, yes, please go ahead. Comments? Jokes? Ma'am?
What is the original source of water?
We have no potable water. Only water is rainwater we gain from that, but that wouldn't be potable water. We have sort of ideas of continuing when we have funding again. For example, the cabin has also no air conditioning. It's only cross-ventilated because we have 8 solar panels and they wouldn't be enough to start an air conditioner. So the water is the same thing. We would have to have a filtration system, and right now it's just for washing and for the shower. Yes, sir.
So venturi effect was one of the important areas that determined the ventilation for the building. Now, the wind direction, so how did you achieve the direction of the house in context to use in CFD?
It was for, well, no, we really did every one of the doors. If you look at it, it has that top window here, and they're all sliding window. And the Venturi effect works when you have it one at the low part, so each in all 3 directions there is a door. It goes diagonally to the room, and you can slide the doors. Half of it is a sliding window, and if you do the exact same square inches, it makes a natural draft. But our testing, what that brought basically is we have always wind there. So the idea was that we are actually opening it up in the morning, because unlike here, it's very dry in West Texas. What that means, even in the summer in July, it can go below 70 degrees. And then you open it all up, you let it cool down, then you close it up.
Yeah, my question was
I'm sorry.
in terms of aligning, because in order to get a maximum effect of Venturi effect, you need to align your building in the direction of the wind.
Yeah, that's what we checked the whole wind thing, and it literally in West Texas, it comes from all directions. I mean, the main weather thing is, well, I did the passive heating and cooling. So that was the main direction, is to the porch. So in the winter it can get heated, and it's slightly southeast. So, and that one is southeast. And then the solar panel, I could go back, probably. Solar panel is perfectly south. We even studied about tracking, you know, the solar panels goes with the tracking. That would be too complicated for our purposes right here. But if I go here, that's what we have. So this is dead south. And by the way, the solar technician came out, because electricity, you need permits, so we couldn't do that work. So he came out there and he forgot his compass. and I'm a member of the Swiss Army, or was, so I remember looking at the sun and the date, and we literally did it by the old field measurement things, and this is what you got. I mean, this is pretty good when you have no compass to lay out your solar panels. That's exactly how they build. So this is southwest. Actually, coincidentally, also, this is to look back to the village. It's outside of the village, so you actually see the village in the horizon. So there is sort of a connection too, but there is really no road going there, so literally sits out in the pasture. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry. Not really. Okay. I tried. Yes?
So I saw there was snow in some of the pictures. So for the winter, it's just the heat from the sun that comes into that door?
Oh, very good question. No, we have a stove. And the stove is actually, we got that from, there's a Morso stove, so our Swedish oven, and people know they're very effective. And it was heating, it would heat normally 1,000 square feet, so we tested it, and you have to literally turn the heating off because it's so quickly heated up, and it will stay warm all day. So that insulation really worked. But no, that would not be, it would not be a net zero building. So I have to tell you that the weather in West Texas is very harsh. I learned this really living there for 18 years. I mean, it's very tough on the building materials, but it can be single digits. And not just for a day or two, literally for 4, and wind. But it also can be 110 degrees in the summer. So for both things you're trying to, and that's a tough thing for the materials, because the worst thing for a material in a way is if it's above freezing during the day and below freezing overnight, because the contraction the material goes through each time, that's very tough. Very, very tough. So I learned a great deal. I'm out there, I've designed quite a few buildings, not just as design build, but that's a very tough environment to plan. Good question. Yes, sir.
Is the cabin just set underground, or you design any special?
Oh, there's a guy named Lou Mills from Virginia Tech. He wanted to do a patent with me, and there it is. I never got the patent, but he was actually from the School of Construction. And that's where I'm, what it is we did the foundation here, and what we did is this sleeved metal tube. And then that's the concrete right here, it goes into the ground. And then we designed that the other sleeved piece, it sticks out a little bit, and then there's a sleeve tube in there with a plate on there. So when we got there, we put the cabin on there, and we had a welder on site. So the foundation was cured, it goes 4 feet into that, it sits on those 4 bolts. It's literally tornado proof at the very instant. It's not a trailer, we bolted that, we welded that thing down. And because you can sleeve it, you put a level there and you jacked it up at the appropriate level height and just welded into the spot. Very proud of that foundation system. I never got the patent though. Anyway.
So your beams actually slid in the concrete?
No, this is a round tool.
That, like, a little bit.
But this is, well, okay, this here is your chassis, right? Your chassis, you saw us welding here, and these are the I-beams, and here are 4 columns. And each of these are that's a section of it. That's that sleeve tube, and that's the collar. Everything is prefabricated. You up and he said level, and the welder started welding that right then and there. But you realize why, at least in Texas and in Virginia, the mobile homes aren't bolted down because people have to, they're on CMU walls, blocks, because they have to pay less insurance than when it's firm to a foundation. So I learned that in Virginia. Oh, by the way, my master thesis was on mobile homes. Anyway, sort of thing. So in a way, this idea, what you now see for 10 years, so I worked on this for even before I started doing this. So it's kind of an interest of mine. Yes, sir. Yeah, it's hard to pin down because we paid for the warehouse, but I can tell you that it was about $60,000.
With the warehouse or without the warehouse?
No, the whole thing with the solar panels, the installation, and then of course it would include the person carrying it out. There's 150 male drives, and the solar component cost about $12,000 or $14,000. And obviously the electrician there, we couldn't install that because you need a license for that. Because we couldn't do it, it's a certified electrician, and I'm sure you have that here too. So the students did the work which they could build, but any certified electrician things, the solar panel installation, it's a kit, but that's basically done by licensed professionals. So the 60,000 is kind of unfair because we paid also for the rental thing. So my grants I got, I used that for paying for the warehouse and all that. And obviously if a contractor builds it, I possibly can crank that out in 3 to 4 weeks. That was sort of my estimate, because the technique is not really new. What we're trying to do is we're trying to use renewable material, which is a pine, a tree regrows. And I think when I saw your pine woods out there at Lake Thoreau here, I saw all kinds of things you could do with cladding and with pine wood. I mean, I wouldn't do corrugated iron. Just as my first impression, you know, like things are site specific. You know, this is a little bit West Texas to me, the corrugated iron. So, yes, sir.
So if you were to try to get LEED certification on this?
Oh, I would be beyond platinum.
I would think so.
We actually looked into that, and these LEED certifications is so expensive. To register with LEED, and it really has to be more like a commercial building. But we did sort of a mock-up LEED thing. We would be way beyond platinum because we generate our own energy and recycled material. But see, in my part of the world, you can actually drive out and you see an abandoned trailer home nobody wants. But the problem with the trailer stuff is like it costs manpower. The first class of the students here, these guys, I had 3 students, 4. 4 believed in me back then. This is the warehouse. No, I'm serious. This is before the big Great Recession, and this is a summer class. And here you see the welded thing is, it took them literally the first half of the summer course to just dismantle that. And then we had that whole thing, we had the recycling, there was aluminum in there, we bought the entire aluminum windows, and the ductwork was real aluminum. We got $6 by the recycle guy for the aluminum. Now think about if you have 2 workers doing every day, we met twice a week, but do every day for a week, and then pull that in, you have to calculate $5,000 just to dismantle it. So it's the labor who makes buildings expensive, and unfortunately sometimes people don't value that. And it was a great, great lesson for all of us and my students especially. So that part, you know, it's like you had to be careful what it was a 92, we found a plywood sheet, we had an OSB sheet, we had a 92 sticker, so it wasn't that old. There was a kitchen fire and that's why we got it. But the steel, that's what we got it from, but we reinforced it because everything is just at the very bottom end. They didn't use 2x4s, they do 1x3s for the walls of the double wide. So the space doesn't allow you to get enough insulation in there. Very telling experience to do that. Way too long of an answer, I'm sorry. Anybody else? No jokes?
Well, I think if you'd be willing to, we'd love to continue the conversation afterwards. I know several students have to
No, I understand. You need to go. You're not offending me. If you need to go some places, I'd be around, be glad to answer anything. So, as best as I can.
A little thank you for you.
Aww.
I want to give you because we've had you busy since you landed. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.